the disaster in Puerto Rico just happened, but can you just tell us what will happen with the panel? How will you assess Puerto Rico needs and fund them in committee and on the floor?
Well, obviously, we've already passed our appropriations bills. We did do a disaster assistance for the last disasters that just happened a few weeks ago. There is some money there that will help them carry through, but it sounds like they'll come to us for their next request. We expect any time in the next couple of weeks, and then obviously we'll move those forward.
Congressman Hurd, you are on a task force set by the Speaker on immigration. Can you tell us what that task force is doing, how often you meet, and what do you think is going to come out of it?
So the goal and the interest is to figure out how the 800,000 young men and women that have only known America can stay here in this country legally. Right? They've been contributing to our society, our culture, our history, and how do we get a bill through the House and ultimately signed into law that has the greatest amount of support? Because the more support we have for a bill, that the stronger that this legislation will stay, and that we don't have the uncertainty that we're dealing with right now. And we meet very.
No, we're not taking questions. Sorry. Please continue.
Yeah. So we're meeting as frequently as we can to try to get this done as quickly as possible. I don't think we should say this as long as 6 months.
Why don't you sign to the DREAM Act?
Well, I'm my goal.
Guys.
Yeah.
When are you going to sign to the DREAM Act?
The DREAM Act is something
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
I know.
DREAM Act.
You're not a co-sponsor.
I haven't been.
Let him answer, please.
I'm going to be able to answer this. I haven't been a co-sponsor, but my goal is to solve the problem. Right? I want to make sure the 800,000. Well, there we go.
DREAM Act now. Guys. DREAM Act now. We're going to have to stop it. DREAM Act now. Congressman.
But you know what? Look. This is what's great about this country, right? Is that it's the competition of ideas that has made this country what it is, and the reality is I'm trying to be part of the solution and making sure that this gets done as quickly as possible.
Congressman Valadao, do you think a deal can be done over the next 3 to 4 or 6 months, as President Trump
Absolutely.
has said?
I do.
But why?
Just from my conversation on the floor, I mean, there's a group of us that have been working for a lot of months behind the scenes and just talking to different members privately, and there is a lot of support. I mean, just yesterday we saw Joe Barton sign on, member of the Freedom Caucus, and we're every day seeing more and more. Members are starting to approach and ask a lot more questions. As soon as Trump made the decision to pull back in 6 months, it did open up the dialogue more, and you see a lot more interest from members. And so I absolutely believe there's a deal possible, and it's very likely.
Do you think a deal is possible and likely?
Absolutely.
And do you think both sides are willing to compromise? Because Nancy Pelosi had a press conference recently, I mentioned the first panel, and they didn't like the verbal deal that she struck with the president.
I think a deal is likely and possible sooner rather than later.
Okay. Do you think that, Congressman Valadao, do you think that Trump will ever get his wall?
I think that there is going to be some sort of border security. I mean, as far as the wall, I'm not sure. Right. But there is a lot going on there, and I know the panel before talked about the border being pretty secure today. I actually went down and visited the border one day, and I think Will was on that trip as well. But I have spent some time down there, and there is a lot going on, but I think there's still a lot more that has to be done. Just look at the Rio Grande, for example. I mean, there's really no way to build a wall there, but there is issues there. I mean, there's obviously situations with drugs, there's situations with trafficking of minors, and then even for us farmers, the concerns of pests and invasive species that come out and can devastate crops. And that's an angle that most people don't think about, but it is a real issue and can literally devastate economies in our whole country.
A question for you, Congressman Hurd, but I want to ask you both. You both represent districts that were won by Hillary Clinton, and you're both targets of Democrats in 2018. Do you hear from Democrats that has any Democrat ever told you, I can't work with you because my leader says, or leaders say, we're going after that guy?
No, I've never heard that.
So they've been. I know you had Beto O'Rourke.
Look, I think the thing that I've learned in the 29 counties I represent, it has 820 miles of the border between the U.S. and Mexico. As I've crisscrossed that and I've crisscrossed this country, people are really looking for us to transcend DNR and actually solve problems, all those things that unites us rather than divides us. And when you talk about those issues, and you have people on both sides of the aisle that are actually willing to work together, despite some competition come November. So this is something that I think that my class, I came in the 2014, in 2014, started in 2015, and the current class, Republicans and Democrats, a lot of people come from previous backgrounds. We're not career politicians, and so there's a bias towards action. So it's about trying to solve some of these problems that many of our predecessors haven't been able to do. And so I've been quite surprised with the ability for Republicans and Democrats. The conflict is all that gets clicks. It's all that's talked about on the media, but there is a lot of back and forth on trying to solve these problems.
I want to answer that. I've actually never been told I can't work with you, but I've been told by members on the Democrat side who have said I'm not supposed to work with you, but they still do.
Okay.
So it's nice to hear that, but yes, there is some of that going on behind the scenes, and I actually believe both sides of the aisle do that, so it's not a shot at one side or the other, but yeah, it's a situation that does happen, and it does come up, and I wish it wouldn't.
Right. After the 2012 election, the RNC put out what it called an autopsy report and said basically why they lost the election and a series of recommendations, and specifically there was a chapter on Hispanics. And one of the things that they said is that the Republican Party must champion immigration reform and carefully craft a tone that takes consideration the unique perspective of the Hispanic community. How did Donald Trump win then? And what does that mean? And what do you see the ideology for Trump going forward?
So how did he win? To be frank, you got to break it down from all you got to look at North Carolina separately. You got to look at Ohio separately, all that. But for the Republican Party, the aftermath, this review that was done in 2012, is still germane. And I always tell my friends in Texas, if the Republican Party in Texas doesn't look like Texas, then we're going to have problems. And I always say I'm one of the few Republicans in Texas that actually has to talk to Democrats. And part of this is we all care about having food on our table, a roof over our head, and the people that are around us being healthy and happy. We talk about that. I agree. No, I'm not.
Hold on.
Dream Act now! Dream Act now!
Congressman Valadao, there were 3 Republican senators who recently introduced a new immigration bill, and they say it's a compromise. It's called the SEED Act, sponsored by Senator Tillis, Langford, as well as Senator Hatch. Have you had a chance to look at that? Do you think that could be a bill that gets things going? It's being heavily criticized by Democrats.
Yeah, and there are even some Democrat senators who are going to meet with them on that side. My focus has been on the House. I've co-sponsored a different piece of legislation. If that bill makes it over to the House, I'll spend a little more time studying. But it does look like something that can get some support on both sides of the aisle. It does end up with a path to citizenship. It's a 15-year process. It's a bill that gives people security so they're not afraid of ICE deporting them the next day. So
I'd have to wait another 15 years after being here for 21 years already, undocumented. Make me wait until I'm 45?
So the situation is from the day that they apply, they would not be deported, so you would not be split up from your family.
So I have to wait another 15 years.
Congressman Hurd, when your constituents back home, what are the top issues they talk about?
About full citizenship.
But what are the top issues here? Are they talking about Obamacare? Are they talking about immigration? Are they talking about jobs? What are when you go home? What are people saying? Outside of Washington, in your district.
Look, for me,
which is a swing district.
A big one is NAFTA. The U.S., Mexico, and Canada, we build things together. The NAFTA has improved our 3 economies by almost 300% over the last 24 years. It is important to the Texas economy. It's important to the U.S. economy, and it's something that we got to make sure we get right. And so NAFTA 2.0 should improve the agreement. not make it worse, because so many jobs are dependent on it, not just in Texas. You know, there's 32 states that in the U.S. that where Mexico is the number one or number two trading partner. There are millions of jobs that are based in the U.S. on trade with Mexico. So this is something that is incredibly important, especially considering I have more border than any other member of Congress.
Congressman, you represent a heavy ag district, which you referred to earlier on. How does that, when you tell people in Congress who are not from ag districts, how does that, representing that kind of district, deal with immigration and the prospects of getting a compromise and how important it is?
Well, my district, obviously, ag plays a different role. There's a situation with those who work in the fields. I mean, we've got a highly skilled labor force there who tend to be undocumented. And agriculture is very technical. It doesn't. A lot of people outside of agriculture don't understand how much talent it requires and the expertise that's behind this. And so that's where the immigration component plays in. But as far as what I'm hearing about in the district mainly, I mean, I've got a large Hispanic population, but I've also got a very large immigrant population. But all the folks have the exact same issues as everyone else. And they're worried about their kids being able to go to school. They're worried about their health care. And I talk a lot about water. It's not just because of farmers, but I actually have communities that have literally been run out of water where they're trucking water into their homes. They're putting up tanks and bringing in trucks full of water to deliver water to their homes. And it's almost like a third world country in some of these communities, and it's an issue that affects everyone, no matter what their immigration status is.
Congressman Hurd, are you encouraged that President Trump's tone on immigration has changed somewhat significantly from the campaign trail to being president?
I don't think it's changed enough, right? I think we have benefited from immigration for every other country for the last couple of decades. Let's continue that, right? And so that's something I think is important and is the bedrock of our nation. And the fact that we've created this divide right now that's not an American ideal. But if we are able to get this right and solve this problem, I think we'll be doing fine.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I think it's great that you guys. We'll go and we talk about policy. You have these discussions, and I think it's great that you come here and discuss policy. Thank you so much. Please thank the congressman, and I hand it back to Diane.
Thank you, Congressman.